The rain hit the warehouse windows like something trying to break through. Marcus Thompson sat in his truck in the parking lot. Engine off. Windshield fogging up. It was 6:15 in the morning. He hadn't slept more than 3 hours. He couldn't remember the last time he had. His hands rested on the steering wheel. He looked at them like they belonged to someone else. They were thin. The knuckles stood out too much. When had that happened? 12 years of single fatherhood. 12 years of warehouse maintenance work. That's what these hands looked like. The fog on the windshield had created a small world all its own. Marcus could see nothing but white. Just the ghost shapes of other cars. He could stay here forever, he thought. Just sit in the truck and never have to decide anything again. But Amelia would be waking up soon. She always woke up at 6:30, before her sister. She would lie in bed for exactly 5 minutes, working up the courage to get out from under the blanket. He knew this about his daughter the way some men know the specifications of their favorite car. It was the knowledge that came from paying attention to things that mattered. He started the engine. The windshield wipers cleared the fog. The world came back into focus. Marcus pulled into the driveway of the house on Caldwell Street at 6:45 a.m. It was a narrow 2-story structure. White siding that needed repainting. A back porch with a broken step he'd been meaning to fix for 6 months. The house was dark except for the upstairs bedroom windows. He knew Amelia and Sophie were still sleeping. He sat in the driveway for a moment, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. This was his transition time, the moment between the warehouse and fatherhood. He used it to arrange his face into something that looked like he had energy, like he had slept, like he had answers to the questions his daughters wouldn't ask, but definitely had. Inside the house was cold. He'd turned the thermostat down to save money. The kitchen was exactly as he'd left it yesterday. Dishes in the sink. 3 plates and 2 water glasses. The takeout container from the Thai place still sitting on the counter. He'd bought pad Thai at 11 p.m. after his shift, eaten it standing up, left the container where it fell. Now, in the morning light, it looked like the physical evidence of failure. Marcus moved through the kitchen mechanically. He rinsed the plates, stacked them in the dishwasher, threw away the container. He didn't run the dishwasher yet. Water bill. Instead, he filled a pot with cold water and put it on the stove for coffee. The coffee maker had broken 3 weeks ago. The pot-on-stove method was temporary, but temporary had become permanent. He was standing there, waiting for the water to boil, when he heard the sound of small feet on the stairs. Not running. Walking carefully, the way children walk when they're trying not to wake anyone. Amelia appeared in the kitchen doorway in her school uniform, and the old high school sweatshirt that was already too small for her growing frame. She was 12 years old, and she was worrying about her father. "You're home," she said. It wasn't a greeting. It was a fact she was confirming for herself. "Yep. Double shift done. How'd you sleep?" "Good." This was a lie. He could see it in the way she held her shoulders. She'd been awake for some of it. Maybe all of it. Sophie's still asleep. Marcus managed a smile that he hoped looked real. "Go wake her up. We need to get breakfast before school." Amelia hesitated in the doorway, wanting to ask something. He could see the question forming behind her eyes. Instead, she just nodded and turned back upstairs. The water was boiling. Marcus poured it into the coffee grounds, watching the dark water bloom and spread. The smell was good. The taste would be thin because he was using the grounds a second time. But the smell was good regardless. He made cereal for the girls. Cheap cereal. The kind with too much sugar and not enough nutritional value. But it was what he could afford, and what they would actually eat. He set out 2 bowls, 2 spoons, poured milk into one of the bowls, and immediately regretted it. The milk was almost out. He'd need to buy more today. But he was short on the grocery budget. He made a mental note to cut back somewhere else. Sophie appeared first this time, shuffling into the kitchen in bare feet, her hair sticking up in approximately 12 different directions. She was 10 minutes younger than Amelia, born when the doctor realized there was a second baby. She moved through the world with less worry and more confusion. She was still figuring out what this place required of her. Breakfast, Marcus said, already knowing she wouldn't be very hungry. Sophie looked at the cereal bowls and nodded without commitment. She climbed into her chair, started eating slowly, moving the spoon from bowl to mouth with the speed of someone who was thinking about something else. Probably school. Probably math, which she didn't understand the way the teacher taught it. Or maybe social studies, which she understood too well. And too painfully. When Amelia came back downstairs, she sat next to Sophie. She began eating with the methodical precision of a small soldier. Eat the food, don't complain. Make room for tomorrow's food. That was the rhythm of their mornings. "How's school?" Marcus asked, running through the conversational motions. "Anything happening this week?" "Math test on Friday," Amelia said. "You studying?" "Yeah. Need help now. You should sleep." And there it was, the concern. His 12-year-old daughter, protecting him from the burden of helping her study. The reversal was so complete, so quiet. He almost missed it. Marcus drank his thin coffee. He watched his daughters eat their cheap cereal. He thought about the promotion he'd turned down 3 years ago. Lead technician, 15% raise, evening shifts. The shift times had made it impossible. He would have worked 5 p.m. to midnight, while someone else watched the girls. Someone besides him. And somewhere in that calculation, he'd decided that less money was worth more presence. But more presence meant more exhaustion. And exhaustion meant less of himself to give them anyway. So he'd turned it down. He still thought about it sometimes, late at night when he couldn't sleep, wondering if he'd made the right choice, or just the choice he could live with. The message from Amelia's teacher came through on his phone at 12:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Marcus was sitting in his truck during his lunch break, eating a sandwich he'd made that morning, reading news headlines he wouldn't remember. The notification said, "Just wanted to flag that Amelia's been a little withdrawn lately. Not disruptive. She's doing fine academically, but she's not really connecting with the other kids. Might be worth checking in." He read it twice. Then he turned the phone face down on the seat next to him and finished his sandwich. The sandwich was turkey and bread, and something that might have been mayonnaise. It wasn't good, but it was food. He ate it anyway, chewing mechanically. The words from the message sitting in his mind like stones, not really connecting with the other kids. What was he supposed to do with that information? He couldn't take her out of school. He couldn't be there at lunch with her. He couldn't make her friends. He was working doubles to keep them housed and fed. There was no bandwidth left for fixing social development. That was the honest truth, and it sat in him like a stone. 2 weeks later, Sophie's report card came home with grades that had dropped, from A's and B's to B's and C's. The comments section said Sophie is a bright student, but seems distracted. She's not disruptive, but she's not fully engaged. It was the same refrain in different words. Not bad enough to be a problem. Not good enough to be fine. He read Sophie's report card on his lunch break, too. He was starting to notice he always read bad news during lunch, as if the act of eating could somehow neutralize the weight of words. That evening, he asked Sophie about school. She said it was fine. She said nothing was wrong. She said she was studying hard, all of which were probably true, and all of which were probably lies, because children learned quickly how to tell adults what they needed to hear. The guilt was the worst part. Not the exhaustion or the money or the broken appliances. The guilt came from the knowledge that his daughters were slowly disappearing, and he was so tired that he was almost okay with it. Marcus had been offered the promotion 3 years ago. He could still see the warehouse manager's face as he said it. Lead technician, 15% raise, You'd be overseeing the maintenance schedule, training new guys, doing the technical diagnostics. It's a promotion you've earned. He'd gone home that night and sat in his truck in the driveway for 45 minutes, thinking about what 15% more money would look like. It was nothing spectacular. It was maybe a new water heater, maybe the roof repair that they needed, maybe less worry about the grocery bill, but the shifts were 5 p.m. to midnight, which meant someone else would be home with Amelia and Sophie. Not physically, because children their age could be alone for a few hours if necessary, but the shift extended into the part of the night where homework happened, where bedtime routines happened, where unexpected fears and questions emerged. He'd turned it down the next morning, told the manager he appreciated the opportunity, but he needed to keep his current schedule for family reasons. The manager had nodded like he understood, though Marcus was pretty sure he didn't. This man had a wife, he had options, now 3 years later with daughters getting older, and expenses getting larger. Marcus sometimes thought about that decision. He thought about it late at night when the house was quiet, and he couldn't sleep. He thought about whether he'd made the right choice, or just the choice he could live with. The answer didn't matter. The choice was made. Instead, Marcus picked up side work. Saturday cleaning jobs at the office building downtown. Wednesday and Thursday evening handyman calls from people who'd find his number on community bulletin boards. It was patchwork income, unreliable, unpredictable. It also meant he was home less. Mrs. Chen from next door watched the girls during the evening jobs. She was 73 years old, kind in the way of people who didn't have many other options. She would sit on his couch with a cup of tea, watch television while Amelia and Sophie did homework, and got ready for bed. By the time Marcus came home at 10 or 11 p.m., the girls would be asleep, and Mrs. Chen would be ready to leave. "They're good kids," she would always say. "No trouble. Just quiet." That word followed him everywhere. Quiet, like it was something to praise instead of something to worry about. Tuesday. Amelia had a soccer game. Marcus worked a double shift at the warehouse. Mrs. Chen took her to the game. Marcus heard about it afterward. "You scored." He high-fived her despite knowing nothing about what happened. She accepted the high five, but her eyes were somewhere else. Wednesday. Sophie woke up sick. Temperature of 100.4. Marcus called into work. He had maybe 6 sick days a year before he started losing pay. He spent the day sitting with her while she slept, checking her temperature every hour, watching her fever spike and drop. By evening, she was better. By Friday, she was back at school. Marcus had already lost a day's wages. Thursday, parent-teacher conference night. Marcus had to work. He sent a note to the teacher explaining his schedule, asking if they could reschedule. The teacher wrote back that she would send home a summary of Amelia's progress. The summary was positive but generic, the kind of feedback you could give about any student who was doing fine academically. Friday, Marcus had the evening off. He took the girls to get ice cream. It was the highlight of the week for all of them. Ice cream cost $7 that he didn't have extra. But it was Friday, and they needed something small to celebrate the fact that the week was over. Saturday laundry. Groceries. The broken bathroom tile that had been loose for 6 months. Marcus spent the day fixing things that nobody would notice unless they broke completely. He also spent time yelling about the dishes not being done, and the dishes being done wrong, and the general chaos of living. The yelling wasn't at the girls, but it landed on them anyway. They retreated to their rooms. The house became quiet again. Sunday church. But not really. Marcus was raised Christian, but had lost the faith somewhere around the time his wife left. He went sometimes because Mrs. Chen went, and she brought the girls. Mostly he sat in the back and thought about the sermon, and forgot it by the time he got home. Marcus realized, in the way of men who are too tired to lie to themselves, that he was organizing his entire existence around survival instead of living. His daughters were growing up in a house where the primary emotion was not love, though it was that too, but exhaustion. The constant gnawing exhaustion of one person trying to do the work of two. Catherine, Their mother hadn't sent a birthday gift in 3 years. She hadn't called. There had been a child support check once, 4 years ago. And then nothing. He'd stopped expecting her to remember. He was so tired. The rain started around 8 p.m. on a Wednesday in September. Marcus was at a cleaning job, scrubbing floors in an office building that someone else had left dirty. The work was mindless, which was good. Mindless work didn't require thought. It only required motion. He got home at 9:30 p.m. The house was dark except for the nightlight in Sophie's room, which cast a pale glow down the hallway. Mrs. Chen had left the porch light on for him, a kindness he'd never asked for, but had come to depend on. He checked on Amelia first. She was asleep, blanket tangled around her legs, her face still creased from the pillow. In sleep, she looked younger. In sleep, she looked like she didn't have to worry about anything. Sophie was still awake, which meant she'd been waiting for him. She reached out as he leaned over to check on her, her small hand finding his wrist in the dark. "You're home," she whispered. "Not quite awake." "I'm home," he whispered back. "Go to sleep. You'll be here tomorrow." He already knew the answer was no. Thursday was a double shift. "I'll be here in the morning," he said. Which was true, but not the answer she'd asked for. She let go of his wrist and turned over, seemingly satisfied by this partial truth. Children were good at accepting what they couldn't change. Downstairs, the kitchen was exactly as he'd left it, cold takeout in his hand. He'd bought it from the Vietnamese place on the way home. 11 p.m. pad thai that would taste like rubber by the next morning if he didn't eat it now, and a sink full of dishes that had accumulated across 2 days. He ate standing up, not tasting the food. The television was off. The house had that particular silence of late night, where every small sound seemed amplified. The refrigerator hummed. The old house settled and creaked. Somewhere in the walls, pipes groaned. He was almost done with the dishes when someone knocked on the door. Not a doorbell. An actual knock. 3 times, evenly spaced, with a clarity that suggested someone who wasn't apologetic about interrupting. Marcus dried his hands on a towel and went to answer it. She was standing under the narrow overhang of the porch, which provided approximately 2 feet of protection from the rain. It wasn't nearly enough. Her hair was soaked completely through, plastered to her head in a way that made her look either young or vulnerable or both. She was wearing a leather jacket that had probably cost more than his weekly paycheck, but it was worn in places where expensive things wore, and she had a canvas bag clutched against her chest, like it was the only thing tethering her to the earth. When she looked at him, there was no performance in it, no performance of distress, no angling for sympathy, just eyes looking at eyes, and the quiet clarity of someone who had already made a decision and was only giving him the courtesy of opening the door. "I need to come inside," she said. Not, "Can I come inside?" Not, "May I come in?" But "I need to come inside." The statement of someone used to getting what she asked for, even when she wasn't asking. Marcus's hand moved instinctively to close the door. "I don't know you. My daughters are asleep." "I know. I'm aware of where you are and who you have and what you'd lose if you made the wrong choice." She paused. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm in trouble and I need to not be out in the rain while someone looks for me. That's all." There was something in her voice that made him believe her, or maybe it was just that he was too tired to argue with a woman in the rain. "I can work," she continued. "I can cook. I can clean. I can take care of the house and the girls. I won't be any trouble." "I don't know you," he said again, but he wasn't closing the door. "No," she agreed. "But your mother did." She reached into her bag, and every protective instinct in Marcus screamed at him to slam the door. People didn't reach into bags at strangers' doorways after dark unless they were about to do something that would hurt. But what she pulled out was a small jewelry box. Inside was a bracelet. Silver. Thin. And engraved on the inside in his mother's handwriting, for Marcus. You are loved. His mother had given him that bracelet when he was 8 years old. She'd been sick. She'd known she was dying, though she hadn't told him yet. She'd sat him down in the kitchen and put the bracelet on his wrist, and told him that when he felt alone, he should remember that he wasn't. She'd died 3 months later. Marcus hadn't shown that bracelet to anyone. He'd worn it under his shirt sleeve his whole life, and he hadn't told a single person it existed. The woman was still holding it out toward him, and his hand had stopped moving. "Where did you get that?" His voice sounded strange in his own ears. Younger, scared. "Your mother gave it to me," the woman said. 3 weeks before she passed. She asked me to find you, to give you this, to tell you something. Marcus stepped back. He didn't make a conscious decision to do it. His body just moved backward, and the woman moved forward. And suddenly she was inside his house, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floor of his entryway. "What's your name, Vivian Cross? How did you know my mother? I was in the hospital at the same time she was. We were roommates for 2 weeks. We talked. She talked mostly about you, about how much you loved your daughters, about how much you were giving them, about how much it was costing you." Marcus couldn't look away from the bracelet. It glinted in the light from the hallway, the same way it had glinted when he was 8 years old, and his mother had first placed it on his wrist. One night he said, though he hadn't planned to say anything, "You can stay one night. You tell me what you came to say, and then in the morning you find somewhere else to go." "Okay. You don't go into any room but the living room. You don't touch anything that isn't yours, and you don't wake my daughters." Vivian nodded. She understood, or at least she accepted the terms. He gave her a thin blanket from the hall closet and pointed at the sofa. He went upstairs and locked his bedroom door, something he'd never done before. Not in all the years of single fatherhood, not even when he was scared. The act of locking it felt like an admission of something he wasn't ready to admit. He lay in the dark and listened to the rain against the windows and to the occasional small sounds from the living room. Vivian settling into the sofa shifting under her weight, her breathing which seemed too measured, too controlled, like she was holding something back. Around midnight he heard her crying, not loudly, just the sound of someone who had learned to grieve in silence. So nobody would hear, and nobody would ask why. He lay in bed with his hand on the doorknob, and he did not open the door. Because if he did, everything would change. And he already knew he wasn't strong enough to send her away after she trusted him with tears. He woke at 6 a.m. to the smell of real cooking. Not cereal, not the quick toast and jam breakfast he'd learned to make without thinking. Real cooking. Butter, coffee, something with eggs. Marcus came down the hallway in a state of confusion, expecting to find something wrong. Instead, he found his kitchen transformed. Clean. The sink was empty. The dishes from last night were done and stacked. The counter had been wiped down. The table was clear. Amelia was sitting in her chair with a bowl of oatmeal in front of her. Blueberries were pressed into the top in a rough circle. A smiley face. She was eating. More than that, she was talking, narrating something that had happened at school, about a girl who brought a hamster to show and tell. And the hamster escaped, and they couldn't find it for an hour. And it turned up in the teacher's desk drawer. Amelia was talking like a kid who believed someone wanted to hear what she had to say. Vivian was at the stove with her back to him, moving quietly. She was wearing one of his old t-shirts, the gray one he'd left on the couch yesterday. It hung on her frame and looked soft in a way that his clothes never looked. "Good morning," Vivian said, still facing the stove. "Coffee's ready." Marcus couldn't move. He was watching his daughter's face, watching the light in her eyes that had been missing for so long. He'd almost forgotten it was supposed to be there. Sophie appeared in her pajamas, barefoot, her hair in 12 different directions. She sat down and looked at the oatmeal without the usual hesitation. She ate. "Toast is coming," Vivian said, still not turning around. "Eggs in a second." By 7 a.m., his entire family was eating a real breakfast together, and Vivian Cross was cooking like she had every right to be there. That night, after the girls were in bed, Marcus asked Vivian to sit down. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Everything." She sat on one end of the couch, and he sat on the other. The two of them separated by distance and uncertainty. "My mother is dead," Marcus said. "Has been for 12 years. So everything you know about me comes from stories she told you before she died. That means you could have gotten the bracelet anywhere. You could have researched me. You could be running a con." "I could," Vivian agreed. She didn't look defensive. "But I'm not. Why should I believe you because your mother's name was Sarah? Because she had your same eyes, the same way of looking at you, like she was trying to memorize you. Because she knew about the promotion you turned down 3 years ago, and she was proud of you for it, and heartbroken for you all at once. Because the only thing she worried about more than you was your daughters, and she worried that you were drowning." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "I came here because she asked me to," Vivian continued. "But I stayed because when I got here and saw how Amelia eats cereal alone for dinner, and how Sophie wakes up at night waiting for you, and how you fall asleep at the breakfast table, I wanted to stay. Wanted to, or needed to. Both. Neither. I don't know. Does it matter?" Marcus didn't answer. He was thinking about his mother in a hospital room, 15 years in the past, with a woman who was now sitting in his living room, wearing his old t-shirt. "Who are you running from?" he asked. "Someone I was stupid enough to let close to me. Someone who controlled everything, my money, my movement, my life. Someone who didn't understand the word no. When I finally left, he started looking for me. That was 8 months ago. Is he a danger to me and my daughters? Not to your daughters, maybe to you if you're seen as protecting me." Marcus thought about this. He thought about the promotion he'd turned down, the exhaustion, the choices he'd made. He thought about Amelia talking at breakfast for the first time in months. "Stay longer," he said. "Not one night. Stay for a week. We'll see how it goes." Vivian didn't look relieved exactly. She looked like someone who'd been given a temporary reprieve from something she'd been expecting for a long time. Days turned into weeks. Vivian established a routine that felt natural and necessary at the same time. She would wake at 5:30 a.m. and start cooking breakfast. She would have the girls ready for school by 7:45 a.m. She would help with homework in the evenings. She would tuck Sophie in and listen to Amelia talk about her day. And Marcus would come home to a house that smelled like food and hope, instead of exhaustion and compromise. The girls stopped asking where their mother was. They seemed to realize with the clarity of children that Vivian wasn't Catherine. Vivian was something else entirely. Vivian was present. Vivian was a choice, made every single day, to stay and care and show up. Marcus noticed the changes in Amelia first. The anxiety that had been sitting in her shoulders seemed to ease. She started raising her hand in class. Her next teacher's report was positive, actual positive, not just not disruptive. Sophie's grades went up. More than that, she started talking more. She would tell Vivian about her day with more detail and enthusiasm than she'd ever shown Marcus, and he had to remind himself not to be hurt by it. His daughter was thriving. That was what mattered. 3 weeks after Vivian arrived, Marcus was standing in the kitchen watching her cook, when he realized he was watching her. Actually, watching her. Not just observing motion. She was moving with a kind of grace. That suggested she was comfortable in her body. Or maybe just more comfortable than she'd been that first night in the rain. She was humming. A song he didn't recognize. but she was humming it like she was allowed to take up space in the world. He realized he was falling for her. The realization came with a wave of guilt so strong it nearly knocked him backward. She was living in his house. She was helping his daughters. He was confusing gratitude with attraction. Help with love. He turned away and focused on making coffee that didn't need making. One morning, almost a month after Vivian arrived, Marcus woke without an alarm. He'd slept through the night for the first time and he couldn't remember how long. 7 hours. 8, maybe. His body felt different. Less like something being held together by tension and coffee, and more like something that was actually resting. He came downstairs to find Vivian and the girls already at the table. Breakfast was made. Everyone was laughing about something Sophie had said, about a boy at school who'd tried to impress a girl and had tripped on the stairs instead. "Morning," Marcus said, and the word felt like a luxury. "Coffee?" Vivian asked, and he nodded. She poured him a cup without asking how he took it. She'd learned that in 4 weeks. She knew he took it black, with a splash of cold milk that made the temperature perfect for drinking without burning his mouth. She knew he was hungry in the morning, and would eat more if she put it directly in front of him. She was learning him. After the girls left for school, Vivian and Marcus stood in the kitchen. And there was a moment, just a moment, where they both realized that they were alone, truly alone, without daughters as barriers or witnesses. Marcus looked at her, and Vivian looked away first. That night, she spent extra time in her room. She was being careful with boundaries. He appreciated it and hated it all at once. Vivian could tell what Amelia needed by watching her face. If there was a math test, Vivian would sit with her and work through the problems patiently, not just giving answers, but explaining the why. When Sophie had an asthma scare in the middle of the night, breathing getting shallow, fear starting to overtake her, Vivian was the one who knew to make her sit up, to use the inhaler that was right where it should be, to talk her through it in a voice that was calm and practiced. One evening, Marcus found her reading an article about childhood anxiety disorders on his laptop. "Why?" he asked. "Because Amelia is anxious and I'm trying to understand it better," Vivian said simply. "Because I used to be anxious too, and I want to know if there's something I'm missing." Marcus realized she wasn't just caring for his daughters. She was studying them. She was trying to understand them deeply enough to help. "My mother told you about them," he said. "Some. The rest I'm figuring out as I go." That night, around 3 a.m., Marcus found Vivian in the kitchen drinking water. She'd been crying. Not loud, not dramatic, just the kind of crying that came from someone who was used to doing it quietly. He didn't ask. She didn't explain. But the silence between them felt like understanding. It took 2 weeks for Vivian to tell him anything substantial about her past. She started with small things. She mentioned that she'd been moving around a lot, never staying in one place for more than a few months. He noticed her watching his daughters, the way someone watches things they're memorizing, knowing they might have to leave. One evening, while she was washing dishes, and he was drying, Marcus asked, "Who are you running from?" "Someone who didn't understand the word no," she said without elaboration. "Someone violent. Not violent exactly, but controlling in a way that made violence feel like a reasonable next step if I didn't comply." Marcus set down the plate he was drying. "Are my daughters in danger? No. Not if you keep them close and don't tell people I'm here. Then you stay," he said, "and we figure out the rest." Over the following weeks, the full story emerged in pieces. Vivian had been in a relationship with a wealthy man, older, established, powerful in ways that suggested he'd always gotten what he wanted. He'd controlled her money, her movements, her relationships with friends. When she'd finally found the courage to leave, he'd started looking for her. 8 months of looking. 8 months of moving from city to city, staying with friends, working temporary jobs, trying to disappear. "How did you end up here?" Marcus asked. "Your mother," Vivian said. "I met her in the hospital. I was there getting checked for injuries. She was there dying. We talked. She gave me her son's name and told me that if I ever needed a place where someone would understand what it meant to be responsible for others, I should find you." That sounds like her. She was very wise for someone who was also very tired. Marcus realized he was in love with this woman. The realization came not as a sudden thing, but as a gradual understanding, the way all true things settle into consciousness. He wasn't confused anymore. He knew exactly what he was feeling, and he had no idea what to do about it. 2 months into Vivian's stay, Marcus was sleeping 8 hours a night. His coffee consumption had dropped by half. He was smiling at work without forcing it. His coworkers started noticing. "You seem different," his supervisor said one afternoon. "Better. I'm just sleeping more. It's more than that. You seem like you're not carrying the entire world on your shoulders anymore." Marcus couldn't deny it. For the first time in 12 years, he was beginning to imagine a future that didn't consist entirely of survival. He was thinking about fixing the back porch, about saving for a vacation, about putting money away for the girl's college education, about things that took time and security and hope. Vivian had given him all three. One morning, he found her wearing one of his old t-shirts again, and this time, she'd done it deliberately. She'd taken it from his room without asking, and when he came downstairs, she was wearing it like a statement. He wanted to touch her. He wanted to reach out and take her hand and ask her to stay permanently, not because his daughters needed her, but because he did. Instead, he poured coffee and didn't say anything. That night, she spent 2 hours in her room, and when she came down, she was being very careful about the space between them. It was a Saturday morning. Marcus had gone upstairs to get something from his room and found Vivian coming out of the bathroom. She was wearing his old t-shirt again, the gray one, and her arm was visible in the morning light. The tattoo covered the inside of her forearm, intricate and dark. It wasn't decorative. It was covering something. Scars, probably. The kind of scars that came from damage that someone had done to you, or damage you'd done to yourself. She didn't move away. She didn't hide it. She just stood there and let him see. "Are you safe?" Marcus asked. "Not in the way you mean," Vivian said. "But maybe I'm getting there." Over the next few nights, she told him the rest. The relationship had been isolating. The man had convinced her that she needed him, that she couldn't survive without him. When she'd finally tried to leave, he'd made it clear that there would be consequences. The scars on her arm were from a time before she met him, before the relationship. They were old wounds that she'd spent years covering with ink, and time, and eventually distance. "I thought I was done with that kind of pain," she told Marcus one night, after the girls were asleep. "But it turns out you never really get done with it. You just learn to carry it." Marcus wanted to tell her that she didn't have to carry it alone anymore. He wanted to tell her that he loved her daughters, and that he was falling in love with her. He wanted to tell her that the 3 weeks she'd planned to stay had become something more, something permanent. Something that felt like destiny, even though he didn't believe in destiny. Instead, he said, "You can stay as long as you need to." "As long as I need to," Vivian repeated, like she was testing the words. "Or as long as I want to." "Both," Marcus said. "Whichever comes first." It was a Wednesday evening in November when the knock came. Not the gentle knock of a neighbor. Not the cheerful knock of someone selling Girl Scout cookies. This was an official knock. A cop knock. Marcus was home, sitting at the dinner table while Vivian cleared plates. Amelia was upstairs doing homework. Sophie was working on an art project in the living room. When he opened the door, there were 2 plainclothes detectives standing on his porch, both white, both with the bearing of people who'd spent a lot of time making people uncomfortable. "We're looking for a Vivian Cross," one of them said. "We'd like to ask her some questions." Marcus's entire body went cold. "What's this about?" "Could be nothing. We're investigating someone, and we think she might have some information that could help us." Vivian appeared beside Marcus in the doorway. She was still wearing her apron from cooking dinner. She was still completely calm, like she'd been expecting this. "I'm Vivian," she said. "We need you to come down to the station, just to talk." Amelia had come to the top of the stairs. She was watching, understanding that something was wrong, even if she didn't understand what. "I need to get a lawyer," Vivian said. "Are you refusing to cooperate?" "I'm saying I want legal representation. I know my rights." The detectives exchanged a look, the kind of look that said they were used to this, and found it mildly annoying. "We can get a warrant," one of them said. Marcus heard himself speak. "I'm her lawyer." The words came out before he could think about them, before he could calculate the consequences, before he could do anything but protect her. The detectives looked at him with new respect, and also suspicion. "You're a lawyer. I'm her representation," Marcus said, which was not the same as answering the question. "If you want to question her, you're going to need that warrant, and even then she's not saying anything without me present. We can get a warrant by tomorrow morning, then get it by tomorrow morning. But tonight, she's staying here, with me, and my children." The detectives didn't like it, but they also didn't have the authority to take her without a warrant. They left after giving Marcus a warning about obstruction of justice, and a look that said they remembered him. After they left, the house was very quiet. "You lied to the police," Vivian said. "I did. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand the consequences? I understand that my daughter was upstairs watching me choose. I understand that you're not going anywhere. I understand that I would lie to a lot more than police for you." Vivian's face did something complicated, relief and fear and gratitude all at once. That night after the girls were in bed, Vivian and Marcus sat in the kitchen, with the lights dimmed and the world feeling very small. "I have to leave," Vivian said. "I can't do this to you. I can't put your daughters in danger. I can't." "You're not leaving," Marcus said. "You lied to police. They can charge you with, I don't care. You're not leaving." "Why?" Vivian asked. "Why would you risk that? Why would you lie?" Marcus reached across the table. He didn't touch her, but he could have. The distance between them felt negotiable for the first time, because Amelia smiled at me for the first time in a year, and it was because you were here. Because Sophie started eating again. Because Sophie started believing that people stay instead of running. Because I'm sleeping through the night. Because for the first time in 12 years I'm not drowning. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. "I came here because your mother asked me to," she said. "But I stayed because of you. That's the part that scares me." "Stay scared," Marcus said. "Stay anyway." The next morning, Marcus called Leon, the one friend he'd made in the years of working maintenance at the law firm downtown. Leon worked in the legal department. He wasn't a criminal defense attorney, but he knew enough to help. "You lied to police about being her lawyer," Leon said when Marcus explained the situation. "Yes. Do you want to go to jail? No. But I also don't want her to leave." Leon was quiet for a long moment. "Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to officially represent her. You get her to tell me everything about this investigation, what it's connected to, all of it. We're going to prepare a statement, and tomorrow, when those detectives come back with a warrant, we're going to show them exactly why their case is garbage. The man who's looking for her is dangerous," Marcus said. "Then we're going to prove that he's the criminal, not her." Over the next 24 hours, Vivian worked with Leon to build a narrative. The man she'd been with. His name was Richard Thorne. He was a venture capitalist with connections in a lot of places. He'd been using those connections to track her, to tell police false stories about embezzlement and fraud, anything that would give them a reason to find her and hand her over to him. But Vivian had evidence. Screenshots of messages where he threatened her. Bank records showing that the money he claimed she'd stolen had actually been transferred back to his accounts. A hospital record from her initial escape, documenting injuries that she'd never pressed charges for. When the detectives came back the next morning with their warrant, Leon met them at the door with a folder full of documentation, proving that Vivian was not the criminal in this scenario, that Richard Thorne was. If you're going to investigate anyone, Leon said it should be him. The detectives looked through the folder. They conferred. They made phone calls. By lunchtime, they had a different story. Vivian wasn't wanted. Richard Thorne was. A warrant was being issued. But not for her. For him. That night, after the girls were asleep, Marcus found Vivian sitting on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket against the November cold. "You can leave now," Marcus said, sitting down beside her. "You're safe. The warrant is out for him. You don't have to stay." "I know," Vivian said. "But you're staying. I'm staying." Marcus took her hand. Her fingers were cold. "I love you," he said. The words came out simple and true. "Not because you saved my daughters, though you did. Not because you saved me, though you did that too. I love you because you're the person I want to wake up next to. Because you're the person I want to grow old with. Because you're the person I want my daughters to learn how to love by watching how I love you." Vivian turned to look at him. In the dark, he could barely see her face, but he could feel her turning. "I came here running from something," she said. "Now I'm staying because I'm running toward something. Toward you, toward them. Toward a life that doesn't look like an escape." "Stay permanently," Marcus said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," Vivian said. "Yes, I'll stay." 3 weeks after the detectives left, Richard Thorne was arrested in his home in Connecticut. He was charged with stalking harassment and filing false reports. He would eventually plead guilty to a reduced charge and spend 18 months in prison. But that was later. In the moment, all that mattered was that he was in custody. And Vivian was free. The morning after his arrest, Marcus woke to the smell of breakfast cooking. Vivian was making pancakes, which she'd never made before, and she was humming. A real hum. Not the quiet one she used to do, but something full and whole. Amelia came downstairs and asked if Vivian was going to stay forever. Vivian looked at Marcus, and he nodded. "Forever," Vivian said. Sophie, still half asleep, accepted this as a fact of nature and moved on to discussing whether she wanted chocolate chips or blueberries in her pancakes. By December, Vivian had found legitimate work. She took a job in the office management department at Leon's law firm, which meant she could work with stable hours. She made her own money. She insisted on paying Marcus for household expenses, and while he resisted, he eventually accepted. Accepting her contribution meant accepting that she was building a life here, not just passing through. Amelia's report cards improved. Her teacher noted that she was more engaged and showing leadership in group projects. What the report card didn't say was that Amelia had stopped worrying about whether her father was okay. She'd stopped being the adult in the relationship. Sophie made the soccer team. She'd tried out on a whim, not expecting to make it, and was shocked and thrilled when she did. Vivian came to every practice. Marcus came to every game. By the end of the season, Sophie had scored 3 goals, and more importantly, she'd learned that being part of something bigger than yourself was possible. The house changed too. Not dramatically, but subtly. The broken back porch step finally got fixed. The bathroom tile got replaced. The kitchen got painted. These weren't big changes, but they were the kind of changes that said someone was planning to be here long enough to make things better. 1 year after Vivian arrived, Marcus stood in his kitchen on a Saturday morning and realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd been this tired, but it was a different kind of tired. The tired of someone who'd been actually living, instead of just surviving. He'd gotten the promotion at the warehouse, with Vivian handling the child care, with her stable income supplementing his. The evening shift became possible. He was now the lead technician. He had people reporting to him. He had respect and authority, and a paycheck that reflected his value. But what mattered more was that he was sleeping 8 hours a night, and dreaming again. Vivian came downstairs with Amelia, who was talking about a science project about renewable energy. Vivian listened the way she always did, like what Amelia was saying was the most important thing in the world. Sophie joined them already in her soccer uniform, because they had a game later. She was eating without needing to be asked. She was confident in a way that children can only be, when they believe they're loved. "We should do something today," Marcus said. "After the game. Something together." "Ice cream," Sophie suggested. "Somewhere better," Vivian said, and everyone looked at her. "What if we went to that place you mentioned, Marcus, the one with the state park? We could do that. We should do that. We should start doing things like that. Big things and small things. We should start living instead of just getting through days." The girls looked at each other, then at Marcus, then back at Vivian. They understood somehow that they were being invited into something bigger, not just a family, but a family that was allowed to do things, and want things, and believe in things. "Okay," Amelia said. "Let's go to the state park." Marcus and Vivian were standing in the kitchen late one night, after the girls had gone to bed. They'd been falling into a routine of these late-night conversations, where the world was quiet, and they could actually talk. "We need to talk about something," Vivian said. "About the future." Marcus's first instinct was fear. She was going to leave. She'd realized she could do better. Be somewhere better. Live a life that didn't involve a single father and his tired children. "I want to move in permanently," she said. And relief washed over him so strongly he had to sit down. "I want to be on the deed. I want to be legally responsible for Sophie and Amelia. I want to be more than the woman who stays. I want to be the woman who belongs." "Are you asking me to marry you?" Marcus asked. "I'm asking you to understand that I'm not going anywhere. I'm asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to marry me because I want to be your wife. Not because I need to be. Because I want to be." Marcus stood up and kissed her. It was the first time they'd kissed, and it felt like the most important kiss of his life, because it was the kiss where everything became real. "Yes," he said. "Yes to everything. Yes to marriage. Yes to forever. Yes to building this life together." In March, 15 months after Vivian arrived, Marcus received a letter. It had been forwarded through his old address, the one he'd updated with the state when he'd gotten primary custody of the girls 12 years ago. The letter was from Catherine, his ex-wife, the girls' biological mother. "I'm coming home," it said. "I want to meet our daughters. I know I have no right to ask for anything. I know I lost that right a long time ago. But I'm stable now. I'm clean now. I'm ready to try." Marcus showed Vivian the letter without comment. They sat across from each other at the kitchen table, and he watched her read it. "What do you want?" she asked when she finished. "I want to meet her. I want to understand why she left. I want to know if our daughters can have a relationship with their biological mother. But I want you here when I do it." "I'll be here," Vivian said. Catherine arrived on a Saturday morning in April. She was different from how Marcus remembered. Softer, maybe. More real. She'd spent 10 years in recovery. From addiction. From the choices she'd made. From the person she'd been. She didn't try to be a mother immediately. She was honest with the girls. "I wasn't ready before. I was sick. I'm trying to be ready now." When Amelia asked why she'd left, Catherine sat down and looked her in the eye. "Because I was broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. Because I made the same mistake a lot of broken people make, which was trying to run from the pain instead of facing it. It took me 10 years to understand that you can't run from yourself." Sophie asked if Marcus would leave too. It was the question that mattered most. "No," Catherine said, looking at Marcus. "He's your rock. I'm just someone who wants to know you if you let me." Catherine stayed for dinner, then for the next weekend. Slowly, carefully, she began building a relationship with her daughters that was based on honesty instead of obligation. Marcus watched Vivian with Catherine, and he saw her being kind and respectful, and careful to never position herself as a replacement or a threat. That's when he knew for certain that he'd found the right person. 3 months later, Marcus and Vivian got married. It wasn't a big ceremony, just a courthouse with Leon as the witness, and Amelia and Sophie wearing dresses that Vivian had helped them pick out. The judge who married them was matter-of-fact, reading the vows like she'd read 1,000 before. But when she got to the part about to have and to hold, she paused, and looked at both of them like she understood what this marriage meant. This wasn't just a legal partnership. This was a commitment to staying, to choosing, to building. After the ceremony, they went to get ice cream. Sophie and Amelia insisted on this, and Marcus and Vivian agreed. They sat in the ice cream shop and watched their daughters laugh, and Marcus reached over and took Vivian's hand under the table. "Thank you," he said. "For what? For staying, for choosing us, for being brave enough to rebuild your life with someone else's children." "Thank you for letting me," Vivian said. "Thank you for being the kind of man who would lie to police for someone he believed in." 6 months later, Richard Thorne went to trial. Vivian testified against him, and it took everything Marcus had not to stand up and hurt this man who'd hurt her. But he sat quietly and watched his wife be brave, and he knew that this was what strength looked like. The verdict came back guilty. 18 months in federal prison. It wasn't enough. Nothing would be enough to undo the damage he'd done. But it was something. It was accountability. It was the law saying that what he did was wrong. After the verdict, Marcus and Vivian stood outside the courthouse. She was crying, but they were different tears than before. Not tears of fear or pain, but tears of closure. "It's over," Marcus said. "It is," Vivian agreed, and she meant it. It was spring again. 1 year exactly since Vivian had knocked on the door in the rain. Marcus stood in the kitchen making breakfast, while Vivian sat at the table, her laptop open, working on the college applications she'd finally decided to complete. She was going back to school, for herself, to build a career that was hers, separate from anyone else's needs. Amelia came downstairs with a college brochure of her own. At 13, she was already thinking about her future. She was confident and articulate, and no longer anxious. She was thriving. Sophie bounded in ready for soccer practice. She was faster now, stronger, more sure of herself. The quiet, worried girl who'd waited for her father to come home was becoming a person with her own voice and her own dreams. "We should go somewhere this summer," Sophie said. "All of us. Somewhere we've never been." "Where would you want to go?" Vivian asked. "Anywhere. Somewhere that's not here." "Why not here?" Marcus asked. "I like it here." Because Sophie said going places is what families do. And she was right. They were a family now, not the family he'd imagined 12 years ago. When Catherine had left, something different, something that had been built piece by piece, moment by moment, by people who'd chosen each other. That evening after the girls were in bed, Marcus and Vivian sat on the back porch, the same porch where she'd sat wrapped in a blanket, the night she'd agreed to stay forever. "Are you happy?" Vivian asked. "I am," Marcus said. "Are you?" "I'm building toward it," Vivian said. "Every day I'm building toward it. Not the kind of happiness that happens to you, but the kind you create by choosing to stay in hard moments." Marcus took her hand. "That's the best kind." 2 years after that first rainy night, the Thompson family stood in the stands at a children's sports competition. It was Sophie's soccer tournament. She was playing against a team from the next district, and she was playing with the confidence of someone who knew she belonged. When Sophie scored, she looked up at the stands. She saw Marcus and Vivian holding hands. She saw Amelia cheering. She saw the family that had chosen her. and fought for her, and stayed even when staying was hard. Marcus squeezed Vivian's hand. She squeezed back. This was the real story. Not triumph over poverty, or obstacles overcome. Not a magical solution to problems that took years to create. This was the story of people choosing to stay. Of people building something real, and complicated, and honest. Amelia turned to them and smiled, the kind of smile that comes from finally believing you're loved, not because you're useful, or quiet, or managing your own pain well, but simply because you exist. Sophie ran off the field, and into their arms, and Marcus realized that this moment, this one small moment, was everything he'd worked toward. Every double shift, every night he'd fallen asleep at the table, every impossible choice to put his daughters before himself. This was the payoff. Vivian was here. His daughters were here, and they were all staying. The rain would come again. There would be hard moments, and questions, and nights when doubt tried to convince them that this wasn't real. But they would face it together. The way you face storms when you have shelter. When you have people who won't leave, they would stay. That was the promise. That was the story. That was everything that mattered.